There is so much opportunity if you take the tiniest bit of time to connect. Non-competing sales professionals can collaborate, share leads, tackle projects together, host joint events, invite different contacts to lunch, start their own networking groups. There's so much power in relationships with other sales professionals if you remain open to the opportunity. But this kills me that people don't, and it happens a lot. So I implore you to be open because you never know the background of the person you're talking to and the types of doors they can open for you. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Prospecting on Purpose. At the time of this recording, we are in the top global 3% of all podcasts. So I'm taking a little time for some woohooing here. This episode is airing at the end of November, and the holiday season has commenced. And this is one of my favorite times of year. First, because I love holiday food and holiday drinks. However, I am allergic to cinnamon, so that's a little bit of a dangerous time of year for me. If any of the listeners have a cinnamon allergy or know someone who has a cinnamon allergy, please send me a note. I have an unofficial mental list going, and so far I've met 5 other people allergic to cinnamon. So we're a tight crew. I'd love to expand the party. But second and most importantly, this time of year gives a natural structure to gather together. So holiday parties, industry events, end of the year celebrations, our calendars can sometimes get a little bit overwhelmed during this time of year. But no matter what time of year it is, networking is a crucial part of prospecting. And one of the easiest ways to do it is by putting yourself in situations where you can network. And I know that some people squirm at the idea of networking events. It can be especially uncomfortable to attend them alone or to put yourself in a situation where you don't know anyone. So, for today's episode, we're going to cover the do's and don'ts of attending networking events. And I'll have helpful tips along the way, whether you're a social butterfly or someone who's working on getting more comfortable with networking. At the end of this episode, I do have a short script that you can use when people ask you, "So, what do you do?" And how we can pivot that question to make us more memorable and not just get stuck in talking about our name and our roles. I'm going to first cover the types of networking events out there. These can come in all sorts of forms. So, business mixers, holiday parties, office parties, grand openings, showroom openings, facility tours, alumni events, community events, charity events, so on and so on. They all lend themselves for great opportunities for in-person networking. Other opportunities for in-person networking are industry events and conferences, trade shows. If you are attending one, make sure you're looking at the full agenda so that you can maximize your efforts at the event. Walking the floor is great, but if you make an effort to attend opening parties, networking breakfast, panel discussions, that's where you can really start to do some more hands-on networking. I went to a conference earlier this year, and one of my friends was a speaker on the panel. And so I wanted to take some photos of her on stage because it's important to have, and it's tough to take if you're on stage. So I took the photos, they turned out great, and I had all of the other panelists in them. And after the event, I was chatting with one of the panelists. I shared with her one of the takeaways that I got from her presentation. And then I showed her the pictures I took. I said, "If you want me to text you these photos?" And she was so grateful. So what a really easy way to get an emotional bank account deposit. And I ended up with her contact details. So if you don't know what I'm talking about here on this concept of the emotional bank account, please go back and listen to episode 21, The Art of Building Relationships in Business. There's a lot of ways that networking events give us this opportunity to make emotional bank account deposits. The next couple of categories offer both in-person and online networking opportunities, roundtable discussions, meetup groups. These are great because they usually attract folks who have common interests, whereas workshops and seminars are usually tailored towards providing education and skill building. And those are found at conferences, of course, but there are so many one-hour virtual workshops available online these days. It's such an untapped opportunity for networking. And why I like any types of these events is that if you are attending a workshop with somebody else, you automatically have something in common with the other attendees. So it lends itself to an instant icebreaker. After the event, you could say, "What did you think?" Or, "I really got this out of it as a takeaway. Oh, I can't wait to try this." It's a really easy structure to start that conversation. So now let's get into some specific do's and don'ts of attending a networking event. We're starting with our do's. First up, do set clear objectives. Why are you going? What do you want to achieve? Do you want to meet a specific person, gain industry knowledge, see the space, understand what the association is about, maybe check out the competition, make new friends? It's okay if you don't know what you're going to go into it and what your objective is, but then maybe your objective is just to understand if this is the type of event that you would want to push your business forward. Or maybe you're trying to get out there more and improve your networking skills. Or maybe you want to host your own networking event and you're looking for ideas. But having any type of objective is going to help drive you to show up the day of the event and make the most of it. Next up, do understand who your host is. Who is putting on the event? Is it a vendor, a client, a prospect? Is it an association hosting the event? If you understand who your host is, then you can say thank you when you run into them. Hosting an event is a huge lift. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of money. If it's worth it for you and your business, I have a future episode coming about how to host a networking event. But expressing gratitude to the host is not only polite, but it's also a deposit in their bank account. And they will appreciate you taking the time to thank them, and they will remember that you did. So nice manners aside, it's going to push that relationship forward. Another really important thing about doing your research ahead of time is that you'll have a better understanding of who will be there and whom you need to meet to push your business forward. For example, if the event is hosted at a client or prospect's office, and during your research, you see on their website that the owner of the company or the manager of the firm is so-and-so. They have a picture on their website. It can be great to keep an eye out if you want to meet them at the event, but let's say they're not staying at the event. You may run into them in the parking lot as they're running out the door. I can probably count a dozen times where I met key decision makers in the elevator or the parking lot, and I knew who they were based on my research. And then I have the opportunity to shake their hand, exchange business cards, send a follow-up, and then it honestly takes a lot of the pressure off of attending the networking event because you met the big boss on the way in the door. Another important piece about understanding who your host is, and this is particularly helpful for introverts. If you can research ahead of time who they are, you have someone to look for when you arrive. It gives you an anchor point or something to do when you get there. If they're organizing the party, they're already there at the start time, and it's a built-in icebreaker to introduce yourself and thank you for hosting them. I was working with a client who was an architectural photographer, and she had just moved to a new city, which meant she had to start from scratch building her book of business. And we were looking at a local architectural association, the AIA, American Institute of Architects, and they had an event happening. One of the committees had an event happening the day after we were speaking. And I said, you got to go to the event. And she was nervous about attending the event because she was a photographer. She was concerned that it was only catered to architects or only architects were allowed to join this committee. And right on the website, it listed the committee chairs and where they worked. So I told her to call and ask them if a photographer would be appropriate to attend. Well, she did. They said, of course. It was a perfect reason for her to reach out. And then what was so great is that when she showed up, the host already knew she was coming, and he ended up introducing her to everyone there and presenting her as a potential resource to their firms. If you know who your host is, it will absolutely serve you well. Our next do is an easy one. Be prepared, bring business cards, digital and or printed. Just make sure you have a stash handy. It sucks to be at an event without one. I keep a couple of cards in my phone case because you never know where you're going to need one. Another way to be prepared is to consider the dress code for the event. If it's a holiday party at a law office, you probably need to wear something a little bit more professional. If it's a networking event with pub trivia, you can dress more casual. So dress for the occasion. Another do is to invite clients or prospects. What a great way to reach out to someone and say, hey, I'm attending this event. I thought you'd be interested because of XYZ. I hope to see you there. Or even better, if you have an expense account, offer to buy their ticket for them. Even if they don't attend the event or respond to your email, it's an easy way to reach out and add those emotional bank account deposits without asking for business or pushing your product. Our next do, bring a wingman or bring a wingwoman. If you are uncomfortable in large groups, consider attending with a colleague or a friend. Having someone familiar can make it easier to approach others together. I like to use a wing woman or wingman and find people at the event by themselves and approach them together. And it's just a nice gesture. And that's the whole point of why we're there. However, there's also a don't when it comes to wingmen, and we will address it when we get to the don'ts. Our next do is to be a croissant, not a bagel. You may have heard this one. If you haven't heard it, I read this somewhere and I really liked it. I've heard it a couple of times now. So I researched it to give it proper credit. A book by Robbie Samuels called Croissants, Not Bagels reads, picture those tight networking circles at events. Those are the bagels. If someone opens up their body language and makes space for others to join the circle, voila, croissant. Set the intention to meet people, and your body language will reflect your intention. Be a croissant. And if you see a croissant, have the green light to go ahead and approach it. And a really simple icebreaker is, do you mind if I join you guys? That's all it takes. Do participate in event programming. So if there's a name tag that they give you when you show up, or if there's an icebreaker game, lean into it and have fun with it. It is there for a reason. It's a crutch to help jumpstart conversations. Use those tools that they're giving you. And if there's no event programming, make some of your own unofficially. Ask people what you think the best bird is. Say you were listening to a podcast on the drive over and the host kept talking about what is the best bird. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back and listen to episode 4 of this podcast, Why Icebreakers Work for Prospecting. Our next do, get their contact information at the event while you're talking to them. It's a lot easier than having a stack of cards to follow up with later, and it can at least get that initial momentum going while you're both standing there. The easiest way is, hey, let's connect on LinkedIn, and just do it while you're talking to them. And if you're having a deeper conversation where you find some common ground, use that to get their phone number or their email address. Hey, let me grab your phone number. I'll text you that podcast episode I was telling you about. Or let me grab your email. I'll send you the book we discussed. I'll send it to you in a LinkedIn message. Find those connection points and then do it, which leads to our last and final do. Follow up with the people that you've met, especially if there's business to be done. If you've taken the time to connect and find ways to add value, the business conversations should be significantly smoother. And that's why we love networking events. It humanizes us and it gives us an opportunity to share our authentic selves. And our final do, follow up with the people you've met, especially if there's business to be done. If you've taken the time to connect and find ways to add value, then the business conversation should be significantly smoother. And that is why we love networking events. It humanizes us and it gives us an opportunity to share our authentic selves. Now, on to the don'ts. I teased this earlier, but if you show up with a wingman or a wingwoman, friend or colleague, don't spend the whole night talking to people you already know. The whole point of being at a networking event is for business development. You can divide and conquer, check in with each other, approach other groups, and start conversations together, but do not be attached at the hip. I also know that I hit at this on the beginning of the episode, but don't discount the online opportunities. If somebody is hosting a virtual event and you're on it, if there's time for Q&A, ask a question. The hosts love interaction. You're going to make yourself more memorable by adding dimension to the event. And usually other people have the same questions, and it gives them a reason to reach out to you. On the flip side, if you're at an event, an online event, and someone asks an insightful question, send them a direct message on Zoom or find them on LinkedIn and send a note and say, hey, I really appreciated that question. I think we may have some things in common. Would you mind if we connected here? I've met so many interesting business connections through online structured events, so don't discount the online networking opportunities. Okay, this one is a big one. I don't want to say don't ask, what do you do? Instead, this don't only ask, what do you do? This question is inevitable at networking events. It goes name, and then what do you do? Or who are you with? And this may be something that's predominant in the United States. For listeners outside of the US, I'd be really interested to hear if these are the types of conversations that are happening at your networking events. So please send me a note. I think it is a big American thing where we attach our identities to our roles and the companies that we work at. But something that I see from a sales capacity time and time again, and it is just such a pet peeve of mine, so I'm bringing it up here, is when you ask, what do you do? Let's say you're a sales professional and you meet another salesperson. Obviously, you are hoping to meet potential clients at this event, right? I can't tell you how many times I've introduced myself to someone, they find out I'm a fellow sales professional, and they literally turn and walk away to find someone who could be a potential client. It's like my existence wasn't worth their time of day. And of course, it's important to not spend the whole time talking to people who can't buy from us. But if you don't take the time to quickly establish a relationship with the person you meet, you shut out so many business opportunities. You leave money on the table by not understanding how that person can be a point of contact for one another. You want to add value to each other. I'm going to share a story that happened to me. It was my first networking event after I had left my corporate role and now I'm self-employed. And it was the first time I wasn't attached to a product that I was selling, a company name that I was selling. And I will tell you, it was weird. It was like having a piece of my identity missing because I didn't have that name attached to my own name. But this particular event was hosted by an association that I have been involved with for 10 years. I've served on the board of directors for 3 of the years. I knew half the people there. So it was important for me to be there. And I wanted to share that I'd started my business. And I meet a man, we're going to call him John. There's lots of Johns out there, but he was new to this group and he was new to his company. And we meet each other and, explain what the other one does. And the second he found out I was a potential client, I was dropped like a sack of potatoes. He literally turned away from me and went to the next person. And I was shocked, jaw dropped, that someone could be that disrespectful to someone else. And obviously with this story, I know that some of my feathers being ruffled has to do with ego. I'm definitely able to see this. But looking at this gentleman, he didn't take any time to understand who I was, why I was there, what my association was with the group. He just shot himself in the foot because he made a lot of assumptions about me. I could have introduced him, and I would have introduced him to half the people there. I could have told him which clients to focus on for the market for his level of product. I could have given him the list of gatekeepers that he needed to connect with. I would have gone around and introduced him to designers that were there because I knew the clients that were there. But I didn't, because he turned and walked away from me the second he thought he couldn't get anything from me. He made a mistake of walking away because he made a lot of assumptions. And this isn't limited to this story. There is so much opportunity if you take the tiniest bit of time to connect. Non-competing sales professionals can collaborate, share leads, tackle projects together, host joint events, invite different contacts to lunch, start their own networking groups. There's so much power in relationships with other sales professionals if you remain open to the opportunity. But this kills me that people don't, and it happens a lot. So I implore you to be open, because you never know the background of the person you're talking to and the types of doors they can open for you. Our next don't monopolize conversations. This is something I have to work on when I have adrenaline going, or if it's a quiet group, I find myself trying to fill the space. So it's really important to focus on being interested as opposed to being interesting. Episode 38 of the show, 8 tips to improve active listening at work, and episode 46, the art of intentional silence. Both of those expand on these if you want some support there. Our next don't be too aggressive on your agenda. It is essential to be proactive in your business development efforts, but avoid being overly aggressive or pushy for your agenda. So if you're at a networking event, this is specifically talking about pushing your product or service or trying to get meetings with people when you've just met them without any value up front. People can see through that. It's not enjoyable. Those aren't the types of people we want to work with. I'm going to guess the conversations that John was having fell into this category. The key word I'm using is that they're trying to get something out of the prospect. So if you stick with ABAV, always be adding value, find ways you can add to the other person. There's going to be an organic time to pivot to sales generating activities. But a networking event is not the time to jump into your sales pitch. It's okay if you're talking shop. That's okay. But keep it as a follow-up item for the future. Brenda, it was so nice to meet you. I loved our conversation about this. I'd love to connect more formally and show you how I can add value to your company with XYZ product. Would you mind if I set a follow-up time for your calendar? Can I take you to lunch? That's when we do the business, after we get that initial relationship built. Our next don't is don't complain or criticize. You want to find connection points with other people. Yes, always. But you do not want to have the connection point being complaining about how long the line is for the bathroom, or I can't believe they are only serving tequila, or I can't believe they don't have any vegetarian items, or parking was such a pain in the butt, right? Those are definitely icebreakers, but they're not how we want to connect with other people, because the last thing you want to do is accidentally insult the host or have the wrong person overhear you, or take your comment out of context, or be seen as a negative person, because we don't want to work with negative people as a general rule. So even if you don't like something at the event, try to find something positive and use that as your connection point. This one's obvious. Don't overindulge. Watch what you're drinking. Nobody wants to be other people's icebreakers pointing out, ooh, look how drunk that woman is, right? It happens. Don't dismiss small talk. If somebody brings up something small, that's their version of an icebreaker. They're throwing out the bait and the line. Just take them up on it and start a conversation. Be open to see people trying and meet them halfway. And then our last don't, do your best not to flake. It's okay if you have to bail on a networking event. You know, I'm a big fan of listening to your body. And if you don't have the social battery to go, that's okay. But if you RSVP to the event and you have a little gas in your tank and you're just waffling a bit, do your best to go. It's always more fun when you get there. You'll catch a second wind. If you have your goals up front, you're going to be able to leave early if you want to go home, but you have a whole list of do's and don'ts to support you here if you're nervous. So I'm just going to implore you to just get out and do your best to get there, because once you get there, you're usually happy that you did. And then I do have one final tip here. I brought it up earlier in the whole, my pet peeve is, what do you do? And that's the only thing we discussed, but it is a common question. And if you're asked that question, obviously you want to have a clear, concise response handy. But specifically in a social setting, I like to add an extra little piece after my introduction that shows a little bit about me and my authentic self. So I meet someone. Hi, my name's Sarah. I'm a sales consultant. I specialize in supporting professionals, prospecting, and business development efforts, but a current passion of mine is building a podcast. So you say your name, you say your job, but then you throw out another, I call them pieces of bait. You throw out another piece of bait that person can grab onto. My name is so-and-so, and I'm a real estate agent, but I will tell you, I'm learning guitar right now, and I think I might have to have a career change. Any type of hobby or interesting tidbit you have is a way to add on to this. I'm taking a pottery course. I just moved to this city. This is my first time at this association. This is my first time at this meeting. It gives the other person something to grab onto if they don't understand the company you work for, or in my salesperson meets salesperson example, it gives you something to build a relationship on, even if it's not work related, but it gives that opportunity to start the conversation besides just the what do you do? And I know that this sort of defeats the purpose, but most people will probably remember the passions and the hobbies that you discussed, as opposed to what is the role at your company. Oh, that's the girl with the podcast. Oh, this person's learning guitar. My brother is a professional guitarist. Maybe I can introduce you, right? It's an easy way to be memorable, easy way to build connections, and the business stuff happens organically after that connection is established. Networking events are huge opportunities to build that foundation, and I hope that this episode gave you some structure on how to navigate those types of events. Good luck in your holiday parties this year. Good luck in your networking events. Happy networking, happy prospecting. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.